when it comes to training, never wire based on an email, never wire based on a phone call. Always make sure you're calling the designated number. These attacks have gotten very sophisticated. So training is layer one, and you can greatly reduce your surface area of attack simply by doing really good training. But training needs to actually be done, it needs to be tracked, and it has to never end. And as much as you think they get it, they don't. New people enter your organizations and they may not have had all that training. And it literally only takes one person to either allow an infection to somebody get inside your network, or for someone to be tricked and give out information that they shouldn't. And it's not always a wire. Sometimes they give out an employee social, which can cause morale issues and lawsuits. And so there's lots of reasons to heavily focus on training. Two-factor authentication. This is what I say is all day, every system, especially email. You cannot be in the world of cloud computing and so much online. You do not want to be 1 weak password away from having information compromised. Email in particular, most email, whether it be Gmail or Microsoft 365, if you don't have two-factor authentication, this happens time and time again where someone will get into your email. There's now AI systems that will scan through all the email and sent and actually pick up on how your writing style is. They'll see who you've been emailing, how frequently, look at your calendar, what's your travel schedule, and they will target the accounts payable person or another vendor to say, hey, I know I'm traveling, this is out of the norm. And I was talking to Sue over in AP just the other day and saying, I know it's not normal, but Jane, I really need you to send this wire to this new vendor because we've got great pricing, but we've got to get the information. That's a literal example. I mean, it sounds so silly. I had a customer call and they said, hey, James, I'm frustrated. And I thought, oh no, what did we do? And they said, I'm frustrated because we didn't listen to you and we didn't want to set up two-factor authentication on our email, and we just wired $35,000 to a fake vendor. So this stuff is very real. And without going into the weeds, and we can in the Q&A section if you have more questions, but please use two-factor authentication. You're just aching and you're asking for it to be compromised. And this is the number one thing that we see happen all the time is people are getting into systems from the outside because they don't have two-factor authentication. And all it takes is one person in the organization to have a weak password. Inventory. I said, when it comes to inventory, what you don't know can kill you. And this really gets into incident response. And due to the nature of our business and what we do, there's a high level of confidentiality, and we can't share the stories of what we have. Companies and nonprofits and various organizations and public entities contact us. And it's everything from tears to lawsuits to employee morale to being absolutely catastrophic events when they're breached. And in that, and we have to respond to the incident, one of the things that you find almost universally is nobody has a complete inventory of what they have. And when you're trying to fight a mass infection or a virus and you don't know what assets you have, especially mobile devices and who's out there and who may be infected, and you can't isolate them off, it is a nightmare, and it will greatly increase the amount of time to remediate the event. I can think of places where, like school districts, where they have a machine that someone stuck up above ceiling tiles and it controlled the digital sign out front, and it was infected, but no one could find it. And it kept trying to reinfect the network every time you get it clean, to devices that get stolen or lost and aren't encrypted, and then someone forgets about it, and then a data breach comes out, and then they didn't notify people, or they didn't properly update that device with their endpoint detection and response, etc. So like say in IT, I don't know anyone that gets into IT to manage backups or to do patches or inventory. It's not fun. It's the boring stuff, but it'll absolutely kill you. Please know what assets and make a concerted effort and even form a small committee to do inventory and make sure that it's kept up regularly. It will be what you get out of it. And you usually will find stuff like old machines that need to be replaced, outdated operating systems. It's surprising what's out there that we don't know about. And so when you get, if you get compromised and you're in the thick of that, having this inventory is, and including software systems, is instrumental in how fast and effectively that you get back online and get your organization back up and running. Antivirus. I put antivirus equals anti-effective. A lot of people think, hey, we're running antivirus and we have a firewall. That's the old way of thinking, and the landscape and the threats have dramatically increased in their complexity. And antivirus, if just on the quick looking here to the right, I don't know why this scrolled over like that, but it's basically, in short, it's looking for patterns and recognition. And these attacks are much more sophisticated. Endpoint detection and response is what EDR stands for. And it gives you what antivirus does, but we're really looking into behavioral analytics and threat detections. Most compromises, they're in systems for well over 120 days inside your network, and they're moving laterally. They're gathering credentials. They're seeing what assets they can have, they can access, what isn't patched. And an EDR, an antivirus isn't going to detect that. An EDR system will look and say, I'm seeing lateral movement. I'm seeing a script that, even though that script is normal, it ran right after they opened this Word document. It wouldn't be humanly possible to run that 10 milliseconds after you open that Word document. The other part is in forensics, when we're looking for root causes or where is this coming from. This has that kind of logging and information that greatly helps in a remediation. And the key point to EDR versus antivirus is isolation. So if you have an infected endpoint device, being able to quickly isolate that and keep it off the network from infecting other devices and not compromising additional, but also still giving your security team or your security partner access to run tools to remediate that machine while still keeping it off the rest of the network is paramount. And so it is a completely different level. It's a lot longer discussion than this slide can do justice for. But please know, basic antivirus, in most of the cases we get called into for remediation, has done absolutely nothing. If anything, it will slow down the process and try to remediate it, because it will fight the legitimate tools that we're trying to use to remediate the situation. So it's good at blocking the wrong things. And so is it better than nothing? Yes, but it pretty much is, they're mopping the floor with it, and it's doing very little to actually protect you. And so this next generation of antivirus, which is now called endpoint detection and response, or you'll hear things like XDR or EDR, that's where you want to be looking into those specific types of solutions. And I don't know how many are familiar with double ransom, and that's, I put when 1 + 1 = 4. So I wouldn't even say it's emerging. It's been happening for a while, but the regularity has greatly increased. So we've encrypted all your data. Here's the ransom fee. We'll let you decrypt your data and get your data back. You pay that, you breathe a sigh of relief, and you start to put things together. And then they come back and they hit you and say, by the way, we have all this data on your customers, or did you know that the CEO said this about the chief marketing officer? And did you want to announce that you were planning or entertaining a acquisition? If you don't want us to make that public, and it's usually 2 to 3 times what the ransom amount is. And so they're double dipping. and it's usually you'll run about 4 times more in total than just a ransomware. Sometimes it's only twice as much, but they're definitely hitting you with this. With ransomware and they decrypt, you know that you got your data back. When you pay them for this, there's no guarantee that they actually wipe the data out, and that you don't know that they're not going to come back later and ask for another round. So again, this comes back to protecting our environments and really locking down our data. And then one thing, just for those of you in over budgets, it's a new landscape, it's new threats, and it is a new budget. And this is not your part of your existing IT budget. It is a new budget item. You have to budget for cybersecurity. You have to budget for redundancies. You need to have incident response plans. You're going to have cyber liability insurance, and you're going to need to invest in some additional layers of tools and services. There's just no way around it. We're on the other end of it. We're on the other end of it where people don't. And then they call, and I can guarantee you it is exponentially more to pay after the fact, and you cannot do security retroactively. So it just, I mean, there's no way around it. It sucks. It sucks. It's, as a business owner myself, the amount of money that we spend on tools and resources it's a new budget item for all of us. And those tools keep getting more sophisticated and also sometimes more expensive in different layers, but the threats are also getting more complex day by day. However, it is a drop in the bucket. You cannot buy your employee morale. You cannot rebuy your customers' trust in your organization when they steal your data. And by the time you pay the ransom, you pay the remediation, you pay for all the cleanup, and you get up and going, then you're going to have to do all this stuff anyways, because now you're a known vulnerable target. You've been hit and compromised before. It's been released on the dark web, and you will see the amount of scans and attacks attempts go up exponentially on your network as they look for other vulnerabilities, thinking that, yeah, it happened to you once, you'll probably fall asleep at the wheel again. And if you don't do the right steps, they'll get you again. So with that, I know I briefly mentioned it in cyber insurance and the trends. The premiums are rising astronomically on your cyber liability policies. Many carriers are dropping out completely. Their losses are so substantial. Your policy limits, pay attention to those things. They're probably not enough. Many carriers do not want to issue over $2 million in policies. And then when you get above that, the number of carriers still issuing policies in 2021, I know even for ourselves, 14 out of 20 carriers that were in the market last year dropped out. So it's a tough space. More exclusions are being added. So if you're grossly negligent, you're not patching your systems, you're not doing basic encryption on your backups, you don't have a copy of an offsite backup, the chances of it being paid out are less and less as they're adding more and more exclusions to the policies. And for any of you that have applied for cyber, the questionnaires are getting longer and longer and longer on, and the new ones are starting to say, what endpoint detection and response system are you using? And they will not take antivirus as a solution. They want endpoint detection and response. They want to know that you have a next generation firewall, and they generally want to know that you have some sort of SOC service, that somebody's actually looking at this stuff. And as I just mentioned on the SOC service, so security is in layers. You have lots of different layers. You have training and phishing campaigns. You have two-factor authentication. You have systems like endpoint detection and response. You have next generation firewalls. You may have dark web scanning. You may have ongoing vulnerability management. You have systems that need to be patched, and you need to know what their patch statuses are. And then there's a whole host of tools doing network discovery and scanning, looking for devices on your network. You can have all those things. And if no one's monitoring and knows how to make sense of those, and you don't have any security analyst, it is a massive amount of information overload. And the key takeaway from this is you have to look for indications of compromise. So it's not the red alarm bells of, oh, we've got a virus and it matched this pattern and we need to go take this machine, clean it. It's, hey, here is something that happened, and it's just an informational log. An example of that would be all of a sudden you get an abnormal amount of Dropbox traffic. But how do you know what abnormal is if you don't have someone that knows how to look at those logs, establish a baseline, and that knows that Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, these kinds of things usually get loaded in the background and they're used to exfiltrate data in the background. So example of that, I brought in an old hard drive in our office one time and started uploading some photos to my Dropbox of my son and I from some vacation. And within 2 minutes, our head of security was standing in my office saying, you have an abnormal amount of information leaving your computer via Dropbox. What are you doing? Or are you doing anything? And, you know, we monitor millions of log events per day. Obviously, there's AI tools like SOAR tools that are helping bubble the right information to the top. But if you don't have a trained analyst that knows how to look through that, you absolutely can be compromised and not know it. And by the time the alarms are going off, it's too late. So you really need to make sure someone, or you have a partner or somebody that's monitoring and interpreting what all this data is from all these different security tools. And so last slide, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, is a lot of people say, where do we start? And the best answer I can give for anyone is you need to start with a security assessment. Everybody's at a different level. Some people are doing 2FA already. Some people have multi-locations. Some have better inventory than others. You don't know what you don't know. Physical security. Do you have policies in place? If someone calls your IT department and says, hey, I need you to reset the password for this person. Or, hey, I'm locked out, reset the password. How are you verifying that person? All of those things come into play. And it really is this concentric circles of these three. What's the threat? What asset are they trying to get? And what's the vulnerability? That's ultimately your risk. And it gives you planning to also budget to say, here's our critical risk, here's our high priority or medium and low. And so you can build a security plan, because like I acknowledge, this is a new budget item and you can't do everything overnight. And this is generally the best place to start is with an assessment. So with that, I will stop sharing PowerPoint because I don't love PowerPoint probably as much as everybody else, and want to open up for any Q&A.
Wow, a lot of good info. Thank you so much. Okay, as a training coordinator for Valley Sierra, do you do trainings for small businesses? Could we bring you on? This is a lot of really good info. I feel like it needs to be just like shared. There's just so much there.
Yes, and so I think it's both. You need to have institutional knowledge of your organization, and you need internal champions to help with the training. And then on a consultative basis, having someone come in and share real world examples really does add some additional context. And also the threats change. And so the institutional knowledge is great, but they're probably not going to know the emerging threat landscape. And so many times we will have organizations that we run their training campaigns and will help them mirror some of the latest threats and attacks. And then they'll do internal trainings, and then maybe once a quarter or biannually, they'll have us come in and also talk to either various departments or their entire organization with some follow-up. So
that's great.
And yes, I will share my email right here with the group if anyone wants to get a hold of me offline. There you go.
And we did record this.
Hey,
under the-
James,
ahead.
sorry, this is Brian. This is Brian from Team SOS. I just wanted to say great job on that presentation. As you know, I've been in this for about 30 years too, and I agree with everything that you said. You did a great.
Thank you so much, Brian. Yeah, we live the nightmare, right? You have to have a high level of empathy in this role. People really are hurt. It's not just a headline. And when you get down into these really, really tough, horrible conversations with people, it is heartbreaking. And so, Brian, I appreciate your heart. I know you guys share the same methodology, but it's not.
Yeah, thanks. We got the call, James, from Cache Creek after they got hit by ransomware. So it's real. It's very real. And it wasn't our customer, but we were able to kind of step in and help them out. But it was a nightmare. And if you're a casino, you can just imagine the amount of money and revenue that cost them.
Yep, absolutely. School districts, we've had, incidents come up where school districts have reached out. Some of those have been in the paper, some no one knows about. And it's terrible. I mean, it affects everybody. It affects our students, the parents, the teachers. And then one thing I'd just say as a side note, for any of you that have kids, if they're under 17, freeze their credit. If they're not going to be getting credit, student data and young people's data goes for 4 to 5 times what our adult data goes for in the dark web. Reason being, if you're 12 and I steal your identity, you're not going to know for a long, long time. I'm probably going to know next time I apply for a loan or a credit card or something in a fairly short amount of time. So they get a long run rate out of that data. And so if your kids aren't applying for credit and loans, it's a little bit of a hassle, but there's forms online. My business partner is big on this and has actually published some articles. If you email, I can get you that on some of the steps to freeze your kids' credit.
James, if you check the chat, Evelyn asked, how can you start that process?
For freezing the credit?
I believe so.
Yes. That I'll send it, whoever wants, put your email and I'll send a link to the article. But essentially you're reaching out to the credit bureaus, the 3 different major credit bureaus, and there are forms that they have to freeze your kids' credit. Great question, Evelyn.
Anyone else have a burning question or thought to share with James?
Just a quick question. What kind of programs or softwares do you use? I know you mentioned Python. I'm just more in the web developer, but what kind of software is the major for the AI?
Without going into specific tools that we use, we don't publicize exactly what we use for obvious reasons, specifically to let attackers know what we're using. But everyone's using SIEM, SIEM tools. Your common ones are like Splunk for aggregating all this data coming in. SOAR tools on the AI side. So if you look up SOAR tools, that's where a lot of, if you're on the development side, a lot of these systems use playbooks to say, hey, if I detect this or there's this kind of event, what do I do? So for instance, I can give you a simple playbook that we have, right? People email all the time, hey, I got this email. Is this legitimate or not? Should I click on this? Well, it takes a security analyst, unless it's absolutely blatant, it takes you 10 to 15 minutes if you know what you're doing. Look up the domains, look through the headers, do all this stuff, right? We have a tool in the AI tool with the SOAR tool. It'll go in, it'll sandbox that, put it in an environment that's completely isolated. It'll click every link in there. It'll take a screenshot of everywhere it went. It'll look through all the headers. It will compare every one of those domain names. It will look up the IP addresses. Are they any that are known blacklisted IP addresses? It will open all attachments, monitor the device, see the virtual or in the sandbox. Did it change registry keys, system files? Did it do any of those things? And it'll render a verdict. If that verdict is, yes, this is malicious, so when you submit it, it'll automatically remove it from your inbox and send you an email and say, hey, thank you for submitting this. We're examining this and we're going to render a verdict and we'll let you know. And generally, in an amount of 2 to 5 minutes, it will have gone through this whole process. If it found it's malicious, it will let you know. It'll say it's been removed, it's malicious. And depending on the email system, but most of the big common ones, it can actually go in, look throughout the entire organization, find every copy of that email and remove it out. So no one else has to have that in their inbox as well. And if it's legitimate, it'll say, hey, we actually checked it, everything's fine. And here it is again, it'll put it back in your inbox. So think on those, for those of you in software development, you pretty much have no code, low code, and high code. So those systems are a lot, we like systems that are low code, where some of it's drag and drop and you put, but you can still script and control some of these things with Python. And then on the EDR, I mean, you got everything from, Sentinel-1 and Palo Alto has Cortex, and there's a whole host of different EDR solutions.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
It's amazing to me, and so many of these conversations that we've had with Tech Connect, all the acronyms and different language you guys use, it's like its own language at times. You're not a tech person, it's its own thing.
Yes.
We have one question in the chat. It says, isn't there malware, ransomware, I hope I'm saying these right, that are hidden on the system and release payloads on a certain deadline? How would the average person know if they have been affected until it's too late?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's exactly what we're talking about, is many of these things are running dormant. So if it's blatant malware, ransomware, basic even antivirus will pick that up. So what you generally see is they will find a way in and they're sniffing around, and at the right moment, they'll launch the ransomware. But you usually won't see that first. And that's where it goes back to, you need EDR tools, you need next generation firewalls, and you need someone looking at these events for correlation of, hey, why is this system reaching out to this site? And yes, they're absolutely timed, but many times they're trying to get in and they're trying to do other things like grab credentials. So never store credentials. Please, please, please. User 101, I just thought of this. School district, they got breached. Google Chrome, when you go to a website, says, hey, do you want to save your password? They say yes. That is so easily cracked. And so now every system, including your personal Amazon account and everything else, they now have access to. So imagine the cleanup of going back, looking at every system you use, payroll, HR, and they've created backdoor accounts. They've reset passwords on accounts that haven't logged in a long time. And now you got to sit down with HR and say, which one of these people are real? We got to reset passwords for every system. And in that one school district case, we had over 60 systems compromised. So what they'll usually do, Joelle, I guess in short answer is yes, they will do that. And I don't know that it's necessarily timed on a specific deadline where they say, hey, on 21 days, launch this. It's normally, what credentials can we get? Because the credentials they're really looking for is how to wipe out your backups. And did you log into your offsite backup? And then we can delete your offsite backup. And then we know that when we launch this ransomware attack, you're not going to have backups that are viable. Did I answer your question on that, Joelle? Perfect. Great. So yeah, the average person, if you're not a security analyst and you don't have the right tools, you won't know until it's too late. Great questions.
Anyone else? If not, I'm going to try and come back around, and we've got a few new names and a couple I think we kind of rushed through and missed. So we'll ask you to introduce yourselves. Judy, can I go to you? Judy Boring, would you like to introduce yourself? How about Evelyn?
Yes, I can do that. Sorry, I was looking for my unmute button. I know I've been doing this for like 2 years now, virtually, but we all know how that goes when we have multiple screens open.
For sure.
I'm Evelyn Ramos. I'm the Associate Director at the Career and Professional Development Center at Stanislaus State. So I apologize for joining late. I was on another meeting, but definitely very valuable information. And one of the reasons I wanted to join is we have a lot of students looking for internships, even alumni who are interested in this field. So we wanted to find local organizations where our students can apply their talents. So I'll definitely be referring them over to DataPath to learn more about you and finding ways to connect. I think it's so important. And I appreciate the freezing your children's information because I do have a 12-year-old. And I had no idea that was something I should be looking out for. So I appreciate it.
Yes. And the thing is you're not the keeper of the information. So you can't secure it all. Student information systems and school districts hold a massive amount of information. And to be honest, many of them aren't secure. And so there's lots of ways for our kids' information to get out there. Yeah. And our heart on that is especially if you're resource challenged and then you're 17 and then you find out your credit's been checked and you don't have the resources to fight it and get it. I mean, you talk about starting life on a hard foot. I mean, that is just a terrible place to start.
Definitely.
For sure. Thank you, Judy. We'll go back to you.
And
Thank you.
just real quick, Evelyn, please reach out to me because there's 2 million jobs in the US, security analyst jobs that are going unfulfilled from lack of talent. So yeah, hit me up and be happy to talk.
Thank you. I'll send you an email. Thank you.
Hi, Judy.
Hi there, James and everyone. Hi, Trish. Yeah, I have multiple screens and I was having issues getting over to my mouse, and I have 2 mice. Anyway, too much equipment on my desk. So thank you so much. I'm sorry I was late as well, and just appreciate everything that you're saying. I know our office utilizes, I work for the Stanislaus County Office of Education, everyone, and I'm the public information officer and work with our tech team. And so we utilize Palo Alto and a bunch of other things because everybody's always trying to get into the school system. So yeah, it's very interesting how often and how many times a day that they're trying to get into our systems. So security is utmost.
Yep. And you're not targeted. That's the thing is people think, oh, we're small, we're not targeted. There's tools running all the time scanning. They'll just determine if you're worth the effort at some point. But yeah, I mean, the stuff doesn't sleep, it runs. And a lot of people don't realize is really good hacker developers have written some very sophisticated tools that have the security payment system built in. They've got all kinds of ways to compromise, and then they're just selling the tools on the dark web. So you have some pretty sophisticated, but more intermediate hackers using some very advanced tools. And it's a big proliferation of attackers out there because of that.
James, did you, because I came in late, so, you know, the latest, what I read was like the T-Mobile, where they got into that account. What's going to happen there? What's happens to all the people? Now, I don't have T-Mobile, but I know a lot of people do.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what they're going to do, but I mean, there is definitely power in that information. And so the vulnerabilities there and what they can do with that information, that one's going to be very interesting. The one that's even more scary right now is this one. If you Google Microsoft Print Nightmare, basic printer service. The Microsoft's written 2, I think, Jay, you might know, 2 or 3 patches, and both of them, there's already workarounds within hours of them publishing them. And if you don't have, now Palo Alto, I know on their firewall, they have some signatures they've released to help block it from communicating out, but it is massive. You're talking every Windows device is in some way pretty much vulnerable to this. And there's been entire colleges and organizations that have stopped and banned printing across the entire organization because the only full fix is turning off your print spooler. So you can't print. So imagine training all your users to start a print spooler service to print and then stop it. Now, there's things that we've done across the board with our customers that greatly lower the risk, but the risk is not fully remediated. So I think that one's even worse than the T-Mobile. And it's still not fixed.
Thank you. Josh, I don't think you introduced yourself yet.
No, I haven't. Thank you. Josh with IT Solutions Curry. James, great job. I think I could speak for you, myself, and Brian that we can't do enough to get this information out. It's shocking how many people don't know about a lot of this stuff. So I really appreciate you being able to really dig into this on this platform.
Yeah, thank you. And in this space, I mean, we've got various companies doing the same thing. There is not enough of us to go around. So
No, not at all.
Is there anyone else that didn't introduce themselves or would like to add a question or a thought for the group? Very cool. All right. So I started to say earlier, we recorded this. I apologize. We missed the first like 2 minutes maybe, but we got all the rest of it. So we will have this rendered and you'll find it on our website within the week. We finally got that piece of tech ironed out on our side. We got the steps figured out and I think we got caught up as of yesterday. So you'll find this there when you're ready to look for it next week. And James, I greatly appreciate that you came and shared as well today. Look forward to partnering with you again.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. It was an honor for you guys to give your guys and gals to give your time up to learn a little bit more about cyber. But feel free, any way we can just be a resource or a help. And like Evelyn, if we can connect with your students, more than happy that we always love engaging with the community in any way we can give back. Trish, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So we meet for this group on the third Thursday of each month, always at 2 o'clock. This is the only one when we talk about how we start bridging back into in-person. We don't know what to do with the Tech Connect going in person, but I'm sure there's a way and a place that's going to make sense for us in the next month or two. So stay tuned for info on that. We're always looking for new speakers. So whether or not you would like to be one or you know of someone that you would recommend to share within the tech space, we're not looking for any one thing. We're actually trying to share a wide array of knowledge and information and services, some so you learn from others what they have and you can help businesses find what they need if you're talking to them.
Hey, Trish.
Yes?
Hey, I wanted to let Evelyn know this is Brian McDermott. If you could get my email, I'm driving right now, or I'd put it in the chat, but if you could get my email from Felicia or Trish, they have it. I'd also like to be included on your list because like James was saying, there's not enough of us out there right now helping people. And I know all of us that are in IT are looking for good people. So definitely take my email address down as well.
Definitely, I'll do that. I'll share that with everyone. I know our students are seeking opportunities, and I feel like the more they know about you as well, the more comfortable they are reaching out. I think a lot of times it's just that feeling of not knowing. But if they were to attend these events, I posted it online so they would attend. So hopefully a few students are here, but definitely trying to make that connection because we know it's such a necessary field. So I'll send that over. Thank you.
Anything from anyone else before we sign off for the day?